Welcome back. I'm in Shantiniketan, which is a village in West Bengal, India today. And we're going to discuss the definition of fascism. And I'm going to define fascism by, in addition to everything else, comparing it to its opposite. And its opposite is Rabindranath Tagore's philosophy of universalism. And Rabindranath Tagore is the person who founded Shantiniketan, and he was this great Bengali philosopher. And we're going to talk a little bit about him as well as the origins of fascism. So this concept arrived to me because I have somebody from business school, somebody I didn't particularly like, who on Facebook wrote something like, Charlie Kirk is a fascist because he asked for the death penalty for Biden in 2023. Now, I'm no great fan of Charlie Kirk, who was recently assassinated, unfortunately. But what I admired about him is he believes in debate, which is what this channel is all about. He would go into college campuses and actually debate. And not only did he relish other opinions and points of view, he actually put at the front of the line people who disagreed with him. And he has the same view towards debate and its importance as I do, which is the way you avoid violence is you settle your issues with the art of debate. So it's a little hard to reconcile the fact that Charlie Kirk believed in free speech with the statement that he's a fascist. Now, the reason this is important is we find ourselves in the U.S. at a moment of a lot of division and a lot of potential violence. And what doesn't help is the statements of people like Simon, who's the person that I didn't particularly like from business school, who says some glib generality like he doesn't believe in violence, but he forwards this statement by somebody else, some radical leftist, saying Charlie Kirk was a fascist, he was a misogynist, he was a racist. What other ist is he? He's just a lot of different ists. And I don't think that's helpful because that primarily incites violence, or it could incite violence, right? So you can't say you're against violence and then forward a statement that could incite violence. So that's why I wanted to make a little video about what exactly fascism is, so people like Simon might learn something. Now, saying somebody should get the death penalty is not fascism. So what is fascism? Well, fascism certainly didn't start with Mussolini, but Mussolini developed it into a political ideology. And he fashioned himself into a bit of a intellectual because he was the head of a newspaper. And he was very influenced by someone called Gustave Le Bon. Now, Le Bon wrote this book. And that book had a serious influence, his magnum opus. And it was about the masses. And basically what Gustave Le Bon said is that the masses of people are the people you have to capture. And capturing the mass of the people is something, because they're the masses and not the elites, you can do through lying, and you can do through a misrepresentation of fact. And he basically was a premonition of Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf, where Hitler says quite explicitly and defines what modern propaganda is. So Mussolini developed this philosophy into a level of professionalism that I believe even Franco or people like him didn't really develop. So what are some of the elements of this philosophy? Well, the first element is what I just said. It's the masses. It's the idea that you have to appeal to the masses, which means not the elites, the working man, the average man, the center of the population distribution, the center of the income distribution. And you have to do it by hammering home some simple concepts which turn basically something that's not a fact into a fact by the virtue that it was repeated enough times. And so there are a couple of elements to this. I'm getting bitten by by flies here, so I'm just going to walk around a little bit. The elements were not only authoritarianism, but also nationalism. And this is where fascists differ from Marxists, because Marxists believe in the dictatorship of the proletariat. So what's the difference? The difference is Marxists don't believe in nationalism. And nationalism is a very important part of fascism. So what Marxism and fascism have in common is they believe in the state, which is dictatorship, but they also believe that the collective, which the state represents, is more important than the individual. So the collective, nationalism, and basically authoritarianism, that's what defines fascism. So for Charlie Kirk to say that Biden should be given the death penalty is not fascism. Because in a fascist state, you don't have freedom of speech. You have this propaganda that goes on and on and on, and you only have the state, and you only have the dictatorship. And in a dictatorship, you don't have freedom of speech. You can't. Because if you have freedom of speech, the truth gets out. And you got to understand that propaganda is a very important part of fascism. So going to college campuses, telling people that you want to debate, putting at the head of the line somebody who disagrees with you, by definition can't be fascism. Because in a fascist state you have no free speech. So now let's look at Tagore. Tagore was this universalist figure. He got the Nobel Prize in Literature. I believe it was 1913, but I could have my year wrong. And he was like this Renaissance man. He was like this guy who painted, wrote poems, he wrote songs, he wrote philosophy. And in so doing, he was like one of the most amazing people I know. He's the one who developed this university called Shantiniketan, where I am. And it was a university that very much developed some of the concepts of Rousseau, which is basically that it's natural curiosity that you have to inspire in a student. So he would see the students outside under the tree. And his whole concept was don't have structure, let the natural curiosity of people dictate what happens, not sort of this very rigid perspective in education. And he did a lot of things. He started a program for rural development, and what I like about that is his point was that one should emphasize self-reliance, not handouts from the state. So my libertarian instincts very much agree with that. So the key part of Tagore's idea was universalism. So part of the program in the undergraduate in his university is you have to study music. You have to study all the arts, visual arts, performing arts. And then you study whatever you study, economics, science, medicine, whatever. But the key was this holistic human being. And the leap from that is to say that a lot of these things connect us as human beings. Music, for example, it transcends language. And so he did the opposite of fascism. He said you need to have a universal man. You need to go beyond race and culture and caste and ethnicity and produce this universal man who is joined at the hips through education and culture. That is to say, if everybody was educated and cultured, they'd see that there's more that joins us rather than what separates us. Now, this is the exact opposite of fascism. Why is that? So Mussolini believed in the state and the all-powerful state and subordination of the individual to the state. Well, Tagore believes in the individual because it's the individual who, through curiosity, develops himself. It's self-reliance in a village that helps these villagers cultivate themselves economically, right? If it's self-reliance, then it's not the state. He believed in free speech because you can't articulate songs and culture without free speech. Free speech is antithetical to a fascist system, as we've described. He believed in non-nationalism. He believed in the human man, that sort of a global citizen, somebody that goes beyond the nation state. To him, a nation state was an artificial construct by man, and it was unnatural. And he felt that at different times in history, you've had a different emphasis. Sometimes you emphasize a city, like the Greek city-states. Sometimes you emphasize a small community, a village. Sometimes you emphasize a larger entity, like a nation-state. Sometimes you emphasize something that's international, like international bodies like the UN. But his point was that nationalism is bad, emphasis on the social entity versus the individual is bad, and absolutely dictatorship, authoritarianism was bad. Why is that? Because he believed that individuals naturally achieve their potential through their curiosity, exactly what Rousseau wrote about in the book Emile. It's a philosophy of education, it's a philosophy of learning. So his point is the objective of education is to cultivate and bring forward that curiosity, and the rest will take care of itself. So in his view, you could go to his university, but you didn't need to go to his university. That if that spark was set out, then curiosity would take care of itself. That's why a lot of these farmers and other village people, to the extent they were exposed to Shantiniketan, the idea is once that spark is lit, the rest is yours, and you can develop your true potential. So, to sum up, what is fascism? Fascism is nationalism, fascism is dictatorship and authoritarianism, and an important part of fascism is the collective rather than the individual. And one of the corollaries is you can't have free speech, because then you're going to question the state and question the propaganda. And what is the opposite of that? The opposite of that is Tagore. Individualism rather than the collective. Universalism and the international man rather than nationalism. and liberty, individual liberty, rather than the opposite of that. And so I leave you with that thought. I leave you with the specific thought that calling people fascists and Nazi and racist and misogynist incites violence, or it could incite violence. And I really do believe that a lot of the left that seems to luxuriate in calling everybody a fascist and a misogynist and a racist and a Nazi bear some responsibility for what happened to Charlie Kirk. I didn't agree with a lot of what he stood for or said, but as Voltaire said, I don't agree with you, but I will put down my life for your right to say what you say, something to that effect. I'm kind of paraphrasing. So something to think about. I'll see you in the next video.